Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Rebuild It. It's been a while since I got to see you guys, so I have a new project in the garage here with me that is not a rebuild project per se. It's more of a driver that I'll be doing some upgrades to and some restoration to and some just little things along the way, and hopefully I'll have it for a few years. I know I always say that, but this is my 1968 Firebird. Believe it or not, the Pontiac Firebird would not have existed if it were not for the other classic car we've done on this channel, the Ford Mustang. The Chevrolet Camaro and its sister, the Pontiac Firebird, were GM's 1967 answer to Ford's 1964.5 pony car. You heard that right. GM saw the huge success that Ford was having with the Mustang and decided to bring its own fighter into the ring. But it took them over 2 years to get the Camaro into production. The Camaro was to go head-to-head with the Mustang, while the Firebird was to take on the Mustang's sister car, the Mercury Cougar. The Cougar was the more refined, upscale version of the Mustang, as was the Firebird in relation to the Camaro. GM wanted to release the two cars in tandem for 1967, but there was a problem. The head of Pontiac, John DeLorean. Yeah, that John DeLorean. DeLorean, who gave the world what is widely considered the first muscle car, the GTO, was not on board with the Firebird. His focus at that time was trying to persuade GM execs to allow him to design a two-seat sports car called the Banshee. The top dogs at GM said, "We already have two-seat sport cars. They're called Corvettes," and they wanted nothing to do with bringing something out to compete with that. DeLorean was finally persuaded, but had delayed so long that he was 6 months behind the development of the Camaro, and the Firebird was released in early 1967, 6 months after the Camaro. The base price for a coupe was $2,666, and the convertible was $2,903. The 1967 base model Firebird came with a 230 cubic inch inline six and was rated at 165 horsepower. There was also a Sprint model, which had the same six-cylinder but included a four-barrel carb, which brought the horsepower up to 215. Most of the Firebirds sold, however, were sold with the V8. There was the 326 making 250 horsepower, the 326 HO, which stood for high output, made 285 horses, and the mighty 400 made 325. A Ram Air package was also available. In 1968, the year of our car, there were a few changes. The 230 cubic inch engine was replaced by a 250, the 326 was replaced by a 350, and an optional 350 HO, which made 320 horses. This special HO 350 produced almost the same horsepower as the previous year's 400 engine. The 400 was also available in 1968. There were a few cosmetic changes as well. Due to a new law mandating side marker lights, the Firebird received illuminated Pontiac emblems in the rear, and the front marker lights were moved to the corner from the center. Also, the front door vent windows were replaced with the new Astro ventilation, the fancy name for a floorboard vent with a manual handle to let in outside air. 1969 had minor engine changes, but the main difference that year was the change to the front end. This was a one-year design change. The instrument panel and the steering wheel were also redesigned, and the ignition switch was moved from the dash to the steering column. The big deal for 1969 was the unveiling of the Trans Am Performance and Appearance Package. This option was an extra $1,083, which would be $8,642 today. All in all, there were over 277,000 first-gen Firebirds produced. In our year of 1968, there were 90,152 coupes and 16,960 convertibles made. Pontiac continued Firebird production through 4 generations, lasting until 2002. Second-gen birds were from 1970 to 1981, third-gen 1982 to 1992, and fourth-gen 1993 to 2002. Firebirds were chosen for several iconic movie TV hero cars, including the Rockford Files, which used 1974 through 78 Firebirds, Smoking the Bandit, which used a 1977 Trans Am, and Knight Rider from 1982 Firebird. So this is not a show car by any stretch of the imagination. It looks better in pictures than it does in real life. It is a 350. Don't know until I get documentation on the original invoice on this thing, if that's what it came out as, or somebody just stuck a 350 on there. It is definitely a driver. The paint is atrocious. There's just scratches, and look at that gap right there. The gap is terrible. There's a big dent right there, and we got a big wide gap here, so that door needs to be moved back. But I think look at the gap in this window. Not even close to going all the way up. But it is a car that I've always wanted. For some reason, the Firebird and Camaro have always been like the classic car that I've liked the most. I don't know what it's the design. If you guys remember, I had the 66 Mustang Fastback, and that was a beautiful design. I love that one. But for some reason, I just love these old first generation Camaro Firebirds. And the Camaro, the reason I didn't go for that is they're everywhere. I see Camaros all the time, first gens, but I hardly ever see a Firebird. It was originally it's a dark green with a black top is what it came from the factory as. And somewhere, somehow, somebody repainted this thing along the way. Look at that antenna. And I believe the biggest clue as to when that was by this tag that goes on the soft top. That 85 right there is a year code. So it was probably been repainted, redone, however you want to say it, in 1985. The paint was probably pretty nice in 1985 when they did it. I thought, well, that wasn't that long ago. And then I started thinking how long that was. That was 85. That was 38 years ago. So it's definitely time for something else to happen to it because it is war. But the seats are nice. Front and back seats are all really nice. I don't know if they were fabric was replaced on them or the vinyl. Here's the interior. It's showing 49. You probably can't see that. 49,000 something miles there. 4-speed. Don't know if it originally was a 4-speed. This console they've taken this part out. So that means probably the original console did not fit the shifter. So it's probably a good bet that this thing was not a 4-speed from the factory. But it was also not a column shift because there's nothing on the column. So it would have had to have been a console shift if it was. Well, it's a non-AC car. Sorry it's so dark in here. But the glove box, I have not been able to get it open. No, the button is like stuck. Got a little crack on the dash right here. Steering wheel, it's pretty nice. I think that the motor is not original motor. Well, I'm sure it's not because I think it's a Chevy 350 instead of a Pontiac 350. So here's the motor. It's got headers on it. Somebody's put aftermarket valve covers and all the bling that they would have liked in the 80s. But the paint job back when they did it to change this over from green, they really did a pretty good job because I don't see any sign of green on this thing. I mean, even in the hood area, the trunk area, it's all blue. Did install a new radiator that looks brand new. And battery, it looks like, but everything else, like whenever they redid everything in the 80s, it looks like. The vinyl top is kind of, I mean, it's really, there's not any tears or rips or any kind of snags or anything in it, but it's kind of needs to be like, I don't think you can bleach them, but it needs to be cleaned somehow. This white really shows any kind of dirt on it. Let me show you the trunk. And if you ever wondered just how you put gas in a Firebird first gen. So here's the trunk. And it probably had some kind of mat down there that held moisture. And surface rust, but there is absolutely no rust through anywhere. So I'm going to wire brush all that, get the rust out of it, and put some coating on that. But I don't see any signs of rust on it. So whenever they redid it in the 80s, they either took care of that or it never had any. These had the light up Pontiac side markers on them, which is cool. The white wall tires with the original wheels, it looks like. Man, that door fitment's terrible. And I'm so used to, now doing all these rebuilds of new cars that the fitment on these just shocks you how bad everything fits. Of course, there's something wrong with the window. I have to tear into the door and figure out why it's not going up. But I'll have to check and see what all works and doesn't work. I know the speedometer worked on the way home. The shifting is really smooth. Once you figure out where the gears are, they're real close together. I mean, like barely move over from when you're going from first. You almost always hit third instead of first when you're trying to get it into gears. So it's just got something to get used to. Oh, one more thing. When I first heard it run, I thought, what is wrong with this thing? Because it does not have timing chain. It has timing gears. And some of you old school hot rodder guys will know what that sounds like. I had never heard what timing gears sound like. It's this whine sound. Some people love it. Some people don't like it. I'll let you guys decide what you think, how it sounds. It's different for sure. One of the things that I love about getting another car is you almost can't stand to just look at it, and you got to start figuring out like what they tell you when you buy it is wrong. Like, what could this be? What could this be? And one of the things they told me that was wrong with this was that the blower did not work. There's no heat and no blower. So I found the blower motor, which is way up under here. And so I traced this wire down, and it was going down there, and it was laying on the header. So it burnt the coating off the wire, and then there's the wire right there. And there's where the wire was grounded out on it right there. So I lifted it up off the header, and then I went in and checked the fuse box. Found a fuse diagram for 68 Firebird, and it was this one right up here. And yes, the fuse was blown. Got the wire off the header, stuck the new fuse in there, which all I could find was a 15 amp around here. So I'll put some power to it and turn on the blower. And we have a blower. So who knows how many years, and yeah, it's working great. Who knows how many years it's been since that worked. So there's one thing we can mark off the list. I just have to put a new wire in there and get the right fuse. So I want to get this thing to where I can kind of drive it around a little bit just to get the feel of it and see what it, needs and where it's leaking. You can see all that oil splatter on the plug wires there. Like it's a valve cover gasket is leaking really bad right through there. The other side is dry. That gasket needs to be replaced for sure. And then when I look under the car, I can see it's been sitting here a day and a half, I think. I can see 2 drops there of oil, something there. So it's definitely got leaks. I'd say it's transmission fluid and who knows what all, but I want to go ahead and change the oil because when I look on the dipstick, I've got a little bit on the very tip. So it doesn't have much oil in it. That needs to be remedied. And who knows how many years it's been since that was replaced. And also the coolant, they just replaced this radiator, but it is like, it's probably halfway down on the radiator. So get some coolant in there. I can see there's a coolant leak right here where the thermostat housing goes into the intake. You can see that moisture there, so that needs to be replaced and resealed. This is a WEIAND, I don't know how you pronounce that. intake, find out more about that and figure out what kind of, if they still make them, and then what kind of thermostat housing that would fit that. But let's start it up for the first time. I'll let the oil warm that is in there warm up a little bit so I can get it drained out good, and let you hear what this thing sounds like. Think of that. How many of you guys like the sound of a timing gear versus timing chain? The exhaust sounds good. See how many lights are working on it. We got one tail light out. It's like none of the side markers are working. So it's gonna need bulbs all over the place. Okay, so I've got the oil draining out, and it is very thin and very black. But definitely leak. I went ahead and took this valve cover off because I want to try to go in town and get a gasket. You can see where it was, see how it's all wet all along that. So it is definitely leaking out of that. So I'll take that gasket with me. The problem is I don't know what this is, this motor. I mean, it's a Chevy, I think it's either a Chevy 327 or 350. There's a way to get numbers off of it and find out, but I'm hoping I can look at both that they have at the parts store and match them up. Take that gasket off, take it with me. So that's one leak that we can probably stop. And then the oil plug had this old nasty thin little gasket on it that shot, so I'll replace it, and hopefully that'll be a couple different leaks. All right, so I'm back from the parts store. If you want to know how crusty this gasket was, yes, those are supposed to be pliable. So that is, I bet you that is the valve cover gasket that was put on in 1985. So I'm pretty sure that the more I look at this car, that anything that was done to it ever was in 1985 or thereabouts, because it's like all old school stuff that would have been done when I was in high school in the 80s. So here's my new little gaskets for the oil plug. Put that on. And believe it or not, they had the valve cover gaskets in stock in my local O'Reilly's. So I'm gonna clean clean that cover up and clean the surface of the head up so that I can get that put back in, and I'll go ahead and replace the other side too. All right, so I've got everything cleaned up here. I got all the dried oil off the plug wires, and one of them was burnt pretty bad, but I don't think it got into the core insulation of it. If it did, we would have a miss because one cylinder wouldn't be firing. I think it's okay for now. We'll probably change them later, but that's just one thing about headers. I never have been a big fan of headers. They sound good and they give you a little more power, but everything, they're so hot. I guess I could wrap them, but everything in there that's close to them gets burnt. So I'm gonna try to route these up around where they cannot touch any header after I get the valve cover back on. And here's the valve cover. It cleaned up really nice. Okay, so I've got the new oil and filter installed and the new valve cover gasket on this side. I'll take that other one off and replace it too. It's not leaking right now, but it's sure it's hard like the other one was. But I just want to start this and make sure I don't see any leaks coming out. So I'm going to start it up and back it out. Okay, I'm just going to back it out a little bit because it's raining out there, and I just want to get it back enough where I can clean up my oil mess. So we'll start it up and let it warm up a little bit and check for leaks. I don't see any leaks. Okay, so I have got this other valve cover gasket switched, got that out, cleaned all up, put the new gasket on there. The old one was not as bad as that one. It was a little more pliable, but somebody had put silicone around it, so I'm hoping it does not leak with the new one on there, but we'll see. And also, what I told you in the last little bit about this little basket down here, I did a little research, and that is not the coolant reservoir spot. That was the washer fluid bottle spot, believe it or not. These cars did not have a coolant reservoir. So whenever they boiled over or whatever, it just went on the ground. So we do not have anything for that hose to go to. Some guys have found one from a Chevy Nova that they've installed underneath the fender right there in that void spot. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not because they were not made with one, so we'll see if I need one later. But just kind of show you, since I've got a flashlight in my hand, I cleaned the gunk off of the timing marks there, but just everywhere on this car is just filthy thick grease and oil just gunked up from years and years and years. So the underneath is really bad. So whenever I've pretty much decided in my mind I'm going to pull this engine and transmission and redo it, just clean everything up and paint it, decide whether I want to keep the timing gears or do I go back to a timing chain. I need to, do a few of the other things I told you about, but just mainly clean it up and make it look nice. And that's kind of what I think I've decided to do on this engine. I still want to hear from you guys what your thoughts are on it.
But you're going to have to wait till next time to figure out what happens next. Hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving break and weekend and all that stuff. I'm, of course, back at Pappy's house, and so...
Filming on the day of Thanksgiving.
Black Friday to all you laymen out there.
Make sure you guys leave some comments down below about what you would like to see done with this engine. I have some thoughts of my own about what I think I'm going to already do, unless somebody has some really good suggestions other than what I'm already thinking.
And our verse of the week is Psalm 107:1, which says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever." Hope you guys have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
See you next week.
And always remember, don't retire it if you can rebuild it. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in and watching this week's episode of Rebuild It. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any awesome content. Have a good one.